We are live.
Here we go. Welcome to the University of Oregon SAIL program faculty presentations. We are really excited and honored today to have a special guest, Matthias Vogel. He is a UO senior instructor for languages, and he is also one of the faculty in residence for the Global Scholars Hall on campus. Matthias has been an incredible volunteer with the SAIL program over the years, sharing his knowledge around the German language, cultural food, and just in general, absolutely loves being with students. So he is here today to share a presentation on what impact does language have. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say, Matthias. Before we get launching off, I would like to share, my name is Laura Fernandez. I am the executive director for the SAIL program at the University of Oregon, and we have a fabulous team of college students who are here supporting you today. So we are looking forward to having you present. So welcome, Matthias.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Laura. And hello, everyone who is watching or will be watching this recorded after we post it on the web. Everybody's probably muted. I cannot see you, but it would be great if you unmute yourself for just a second and say hello. Teachers in classrooms or teachers or students, if you can just unmute and say hello, that would be great. Then I know that everybody is there and I'm not only talking to Laura. So hello.
And Matthias, in the many participants are streaming live on YouTube, so I'm not sure.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Unmute. But participants, you can enter questions into the chat at any time, so Matthias knows that he can answer your questions.
Okay. All right.
They're here.
All right, so I will go on. Again, hello to everybody. I'm Matthias Vogel, as Laura said. Laura has asked me to introduce myself a little bit more to you and to let you know what my background is. I was born in Germany, in the city of Mainz, which is a 2,000-year-old city. So yes, quite a few years. In the center of the city is this old cathedral that was begun in the year 975. I grew up literally next door to this cathedral, and it is a monumental building that whenever I visit Mainz, I just go stroll through downtown and also visit this cathedral. Here you have a few pictures of the area of where I am from. The picture up above is the market square that you see there. You would frequently see me sitting in one of these cafes as I was a young man in Mainz. This is typical German timber frame housing. As I said, the city is very old. This is one of my favorite pubs and Gaststuben here that I grew up with. And this, of course, the River Rhine, one of the largest rivers in Europe and the largest river in Germany, and one of the castles along the Rhine. So basically all the stereotypical images about Germany, I grew up in between those. I grew up with a religious background. I was raised Catholic, and that cathedral that we saw there in the earlier picture was in my earlier life one of my focal points, and the religion was one of my focal points. And there's one altar in this church mounted on the wall that kind of spoke to me. I had to think about what does that tell me, and as I was going through high school and growing older, I wondered about what is the meaning of life. Probably like a lot of you who are watching are trying to figure out yourselves. And I was reminded of, yes, I might be young now, but there are many different aspects to life. And how can I address them? What can I learn? This altar here on the left shows a figure that is still in the flesh, and then juxtaposed on the right, you see a skeleton. So after life on Earth, and that skeleton is holding up the cup there. So life and death were juxtaposed, and I had really a hard time figuring out what I should make of all of that. Thought maybe I should turn to religion, to God, to the Word of God. And it just so happened that the city that I'm from is also the city where printing was invented. Mainz is the city where in the 15th century Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press. And the first thing that he printed was was a Bible. So that's what we see right here is a statue of Johannes Gutenberg holding the first printed book that he did, and that was a Bible. So I thought, the Word of God. Well, maybe I'll find some answer in writing, in the Word, in language, but. But which language would that be? I figured out, well, the Bible wasn't written in German. And wait a minute. The Bible was written in many different languages, translated into many different languages. And well, the Word of God, then how do I interpret that? And eventually I found my way to being an instructor of language at the U of O and studying language. And I found out that the language that we are using actually helps us think about the world around us and shapes how we think about the world around us. So I have a little question here for you. Where did the thief go? That in German, you might get a more accurate answer. But if you ask, how did she get away? You might want to switch to English and you might get a better answer. How does that work? Well, turns out speakers of English and of German, and I will demonstrate, give a few examples of how language influences the way we see the world now in this presentation. Turns out that speakers of English and German put different emphasis on actions and on their consequences versus talking about the action itself, the process, how certain things got achieved, etc. So what I'll say is that English influences us to look at the world in a certain way versus German will influence us to look in the world at the world in a certain way. And your high school teachers may have told you you should study a language. It broadens your horizons. And I heard that when I was in high school. I tell that to our students at the university. And often that conversation is interpreted as, okay, so learning another language teaches me about the history and the culture of another country. And that is all true, and that is all important. But what we often don't become aware of is that learning another language will actually literally allow us to think about the world differently because of the structures that are formed in our brains and that help us examine reality and classify and categorize reality. So in English, I'll go back once. In English, you have what is called a progressive tense. You have present tense continuous, past tense continuous, past perfect continuous. And what does all that mean? Well, in English, you can say, I was watching the presentation, the sale presentation, that is different from I watched the sale presentation. Normally, if I had you here as a live audience, I would ask you, what is the difference between I was sailing to Bermuda and I saw Elvis, and I sailed to Bermuda and I saw Elvis? Since I don't have any live high school students in front of me, I will ask any of the sales staff to unmute themselves and contribute. What do you think is the difference between I was sailing to Bermuda and I saw or I met Elvis versus I sailed to Bermuda and I saw Elvis? Take a moment to think. That's perfectly fine. It's not that easy. Anybody? This is what. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, it sounds to me like one is sort of in the process of sailing versus one thing is something happened and then another thing happened.
And you would be right, Megan. Absolutely. I was sailing to Bermuda and I saw Elvis. You can imagine yourself on the deck of the Titanic, and Elvis is either walking by or he's sailing by or he is calling to you. Whereas the second one, I sailed to Bermuda and I saw Elvis. You actually, well, I guess the Titanic wouldn't be sailing, but you actually sailed to Bermuda. And then there in Bermuda, you saw Elvis. The first one is a process, a progression of events that was going on while something else happened. And the next one is this happened, and then that happened, and then something else happened. That's a grammatical feature that English has, but that German does not have. So does that have any effect on how speakers of English and of German see the world? And it turns out German speakers tend to specify the beginnings, the middle, and the ends of events, whereas English speakers often leave out the end points and of an action, and they focus more on the action itself. So looking at a similar scene in a picture, for example, an English speaker would probably emphasize how something was happening versus a German speaker looking at the same photograph or the scene would emphasize the result or the end point of that action. So my next slide has two pictures. So I invite you to look at these pictures for just a minute and take them in and think about what you see happening there. Okay, so I will ask Lara to describe the picture on the lower right of the screen.
So what I see is a man with a briefcase and a suit walking very purposefully, it looks like, towards a building, and other people, another person in more casual fashion, but also walking in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Laura. And now Megan. See the other picture in the upper left? Either Megan or Josie.
Yeah, sure. So I see a person riding a bicycle in front of a set of stairs and carrying maybe a small guitar or a large ukulele.
Okay, thank you, Megan. And now everybody who was listening, did you notice what grammatical construction both Laura and Megan used? Megan just said there's a person bicycling and carrying. Did you notice all those ing forms, ing forms? They're describing the process. Laura was saying there's a man walking. And Laura did tag on, he's walking towards a building. There's another guy and he's walking more leisurely, and she described he's carrying the suitcase. If you showed the same pictures to a German might have said, I am a German. I might have said, oh, the man in the picture in the upper left. I have to use English to communicate with you, so I'll say it, use it the same ing form, but I'll tag an endpoint on. I would probably say he's biking to a concert. He's carrying a guitar. So I'm trying to figure out where is he going towards, what's his goal, what's his endpoint. The man in the picture down below, it's like, oh, he's dressed in a business suit, he's carrying this satchel or briefcase or whatever it is. Oh, so he must be on the way to a business meeting. And so what researchers have found is that this difference in the grammatical structures of the language can make a difference in the way that speakers of these languages explain the world and categorize the world. And they actually have found that this is with a 70% likelihood a German will put an endpoint on the description and will talk about the ultimate goal, and an English speaker will, with a 70% likelihood, talk about the process and spend more time on how something is happening. And if they're bilingual speakers, then these bilingual speakers, they get the best of both worlds in some ways, because it depends on which language they are thinking in. And as they're looking at the world and as they're describing processes or describing the world. So if in a controlled testing environment, the subjects are cued to speak or think in English, and they're shown a picture, they will all think about and talk about progress and process. How are things happening? If they're cued in German, they will switch to become more goal-oriented and say, oh, this man is walking to his business meeting. If they are cued in to think and speak in German. So really, learning another language, this would suggest that a second language can play an important role in framing our perception and how we see the world. And so by having another language, you have basically an alternate vision of the world. And you can compare that to listening to just one loudspeaker, or with mono, or listening to two loudspeakers and listening in stereo, because you get a much rounder, better rounded ability to look at the world and categorize the world. So when people are telling us we should learn languages because it broadens our horizons, it's not just because from the perspective of an English speaker. I learn about the history and about the culture of Mexico, Chile, Germany, France, Italy, China. It's because I will literally understand better how cultures and speakers of these other languages are seeing the world, and I will be better able to understand them and their perspective. Now, all right, let's go on. I have a little YouTube video for you with a typical German particularity. Germans are very fond of making long words. And I will move out of my presentation here, and I will switch to my browser. I will share this. We'll go to the beginning. This is a short video demonstration of not just grammatical structures, but also in terms of lexical elements, how Germans can make those long words. Of course, that is based on grammatical possibilities. In German, I can say the Danube steamboat captain's hat, and that is all one word. You'll see how this works here in a second. So I will play this, turn the volume up. And then Lara and Megan, you can tell me if it's too loud or too soft or anything like that.
We're hugely dependent on language to help us express what we really think and feel. But some languages are better than others at crisply naming important feelings. Germans have been geniuses at inventing long, or what get called compound words, that elegantly put a finger on sensations that we all know, but that other languages require whole clumsy sentences or paragraphs to express. So here is a small selection of the best of Germany's extraordinary range of compound words. Erklärungsnot.
So I just wanted to point out that there is, as you see the word Erklärungsnot, you have, this is a compound of two words, Erklärung, explanation, and emergency. It's the emergency you experience when you cannot explain something that you've been asked about or caught doing, and so on.
Other people and realize that they've ordered something better off the menu that you'd be dying to eat yourself. Perhaps you were trying to be abstemious. Now you're just starving. The word recognizes that we spend much of our lives feeling we've ordered the wrong thing, and not just in restaurants. Luftschloss. Literally a castle in the air, a dream that's unattainable. A word suggesting that German culture is deeply indulgent about big dreams, but also gently realistic about how hard it can be to bring them off. Pfeifengesicht, a face that's begging to be slapped. Generosity towards others is key, but German is bracing and frank enough to acknowledge that there are also moments when it's simply more honest to realize we may have come face to face with a dickhead. Wienenlust. This word shows German at its most delightfully fetishistic and particular. The delight one can feel at seeing ruins. Collapsed palaces and the rubble of temples put anxieties about the present into perspective, and induce a pleasing melancholy at the passage of all things. Kummerspeck. Literally sorrow fat, a word that frankly recognizes how often, when one is deeply sad, there is simply nothing more consoling to do than to head for the kitchen and eat. Fremdschämen. A word full of empathy that captures the agony one can feel at somebody else's embarrassing misfortune or failure. A capacity to feel Fremdschämen is a high moral achievement and is at the root of kindness. Weltschmerz. Literally world sadness, a word that acknowledges that we are sometimes sad not about this or that thing, but about the whole basis of existence. The presence of the word indicates a culture that isn't falsely cheerful, but takes tragedy as a given. It is immensely reassuring to be able to tell a friend that one is presently lying under the duvet, suffering from Weltschmerz. Schadenfreude. We're meant to be sad when others fail, but German more wisely accepts that we often feel happiness, Freude, at the misfortunes, the Schaden of others. That isn't because we're mean. We just feel deeply reassured when we see confirmation that life is as hard for other people as it is for us. We can thank German for having so many of the right words to bring dignity to our troubles and hopes. Learning languages ultimately has little to do with discovering the world per se. It's about acquiring tools to help us get a clearer grasp on the elusive parts of ourselves.
So I hope you also have not just found the graphics funny, but listened to the explanation that went along this little YouTube video. Because what you have maybe picked up is that German is very direct and focuses directly on the end point, what needs or should be said, rather than beating around the bush and circling around the bush, and a lot of Germans come right to the point. We can lead this back again to the grammatical structures of how Germans look at the world, categorize the world, view the world. They want to come right to the point. And so this leads me to another area where this is of rather large importance, and that is cross-cultural communication. You may have German exchange students at your high school, or you may be interested in signing up for an exchange student from Germany or either from other countries. For other countries, it would be then important to examine what other languages' particularities are and how they see the world. But if you have an exchange student, or if you're interested in studying business, maybe at the U of O or maybe anywhere else, or even if you're not studying business, but you're part of a company that works internationally, business communication, business customs are important. And so let me play from a current slide. There we go. Let's look at how this, what I explained earlier, can be related to communication among business partners. So first of all, we'll look at a German understanding of a professional, the first meeting, and features of business communications and how Germans solve conflict situations. Participants in cross-cultural trainings on German culture usually ask, what qualities do German partners value most, or what do Germans look for in a foreign partner? And the easy answer is Germans value professionalism. Difficulties arise when it becomes clear that the Germans' understanding of professionalism is different. So what is professional in German and how do they behave? Knowing what you have listened to just a minute ago, let me ask our sales staff to make a prediction. How would a German business partner communicate with you, or be expected to communicate with you? And that could be Lara, or Megan, or Josie, or Lauren, either one. What do you expect?
Well, they sound, from your description, they'd be very to the point. So you would know exactly what their business purpose is, why they're there.
Exactly. Yes, you are right, Laura. Thank you. The German, again, would be serious, would be action-oriented, would be dedicated to their work, would be methodical, consistent, structured, inclined to perfectionism, etc., etc. They would come, as Laura just pointed out, boom, straight to the point. In some cultures that are not as task-oriented, but that are more people-oriented, this can be coming across as very rude, unless you know how business communication or communication is taking place in this other culture. So in a German context, for example, if you are meeting a business partner, you don't want to fill your first 20 minutes with pleasantries and inquiring about your day. You would not inquire about the family. Laura, I would not, when I meet you in a German context, spend a half hour talking about your family, about how your day went, or what went well and what didn't go well. I would come right to the point. After exchanging a few pleasantries like, how are you today? You're well? Okay, good. All right. Now let's talk about the issue at hand. And that is because in that whole process, Germans are very goal-oriented, and that come across from an American perspective, an English speaker perspective. Often, Laura, what do you think if I meet you? I'm your business partner. We are discussing a new business venture, and after exchanging 2-3 sentences, I ask you, well, let's get down to business now. How would that come across?
Well, if I didn't know you and understand the German culture, I think you explained it well. It probably would maybe take me back for a minute because, yes, I think in our culture in America, we tend to want to get to know each other a little bit before we jump right to the point. So.
Mm-hmm. And how, Laura, what do you think? How would a German view you, if you didn't know, okay, Germans want to come right to the point, how would a German view your attempts to exchange pleasantries for about maybe, I don't know, a half hour or however long you personally would?
Well, I would imagine I tend personally to be a get to the point person as well. So I would imagine they were thinking I was wasting their time.
Yeah, exactly. And so what is perceived as rude in a German context is almost the exact opposite as what is perceived as rude in an American context. So for a German, if you spend too much time on things that are not related to your task at hand, the task why you came together, people will get annoyed with you, and they will also think, this person doesn't know what they are talking about. And they will be, it will not influence their business decision one way or the other, whether you ask them how their kids are and how their families are, and so on and so forth. A lot of Germans will, in a business meeting, not necessarily take into account private circumstances, private weaknesses, but they will discuss the task, and if it is if that task is related to somewhere where you or I or anybody else might have messed up, that's part of the process. That's nothing to be hidden, but instead, if you kind of tiptoe around things and try to be too accommodating or too nice because somebody has messed up somewhere along the road, that is perceived as a weakness, because you cannot focus on the goal that is at hand, and you're putting personal things above what you actually came together to do. Now, you have to know that if you're working for a larger company, you have to know how communication is going. And that is why one of the largest supermarket chains in the world, Lidl, we don't have any Lidl here at the West Coast, I don't think, but Lidl came to us a few years back, as they were expanding into an American market. Lidl is, I think, the second largest grocery store chain in the world. And they said, we have tried hiring English speakers and tried to teach them some German along the way, but it has not worked. We need to have well-educated German speakers who understand the language, who understand our business culture. And so in this presentation, I have what I have tried to tell you is that this business culture is part of a larger German culture that is based on the way the German language functions, and that is it has different structures than English. While English can stress process and focus on duration, Germans will be much more goal-oriented. And they will be less kind of warm and cuddly and around the edges. That all can be related back to the structures that we use to describe the world. So I have some time for questions. I have some more slides, but I think we maybe saw some questions go up in the chat. So maybe Megan or Laura can relay some of the questions to me that you have had.
We have quite a few questions that I can combine some of the questions that are curious about how difficult it is to learn a language, and that in European cultures, often they will start teaching language at a much earlier age than they do here. So do you notice if it's much harder to learn a language as an older individual versus why are we not learning languages earlier in the US?
So I heard two different questions. One is how soon do we start learning languages in Germany and in other countries in Europe, and how difficult is it going to be? Well, really everything in life that's worth its worth is difficult. And after you've strived for something for a while, and you look back and when you have achieved it, or even if you're only partially there, when you look back to what you have achieved, there's like this, I take a deep breath, it's like, wow, yeah, I did it. The way there is usually people screaming and yelling, hand and foot, and resisting, and oh my gosh, it's so much work. What am I doing? I will never make it. And you have to push all that out of your mind, because yes, you will make it. Is it easier to learn a language as an adult versus is it easier to learn a language as a child? That is not actually, people often think that it's much easier to learn a language as a child, and that is not actually true. Children learn languages in different ways from adults. Adults may not learn quite as form new synapses quite as easily, but adults have higher developed analytical skills, and those analytical skills will help them see structures and acquire structures in a faster way than what younger kids usually can do, simply because, at least in younger kids, their cognitive abilities haven't formed in quite the same way yet as adults have. Yes, you can learn a language as an adult or as a young adult. Once you have learned one language, learning a second one will come much easier. And Lara, we're going out mostly to high schools, right? Or some middle schools also? Mostly high school?
Mostly high school, yes.
Yeah. So I would urge you to take a language. Of course, I would like it to be German, but a language in high school, whether that is Spanish, Japanese, we have Japanese immersion program in Portland, whether that's French, a French immersion school in Eugene, whether it's German, international, going for the international baccalaureate and having a language. I would recommend you take a language at the high school and give it your all. And then when you're at the college, it'll be so much easier to continue with that language or to pick up a second language. Now in Europe, I started learning English when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, when I was 9 years old. But I have to tell you, it did not come easy. So when I said along the way there, people usually struggle and scream and resist, I know what I'm talking about. Because I just about had to repeat class because my English was not good. And English is one of the subjects in a German school that you need to have at least a C- in, or you have to repeat the whole year. So I made it eventually. So I know what a struggle it can be, but I also know that it's possible to learn another language. And I started when I was 9 in high school, right at the beginning. German high school is a little bit structured, a little bit different. But I started when I was 9. I guess I would in the US I would be middle school, 9 or 10, and then I continued with English throughout my high school career. After my first 2 years in middle/high school, we go from elementary school to high school right away in Germany. So that's why it's different. 4 years in elementary school and then 9 years at the high school. And so after my first 2 years in high school, then I added French. So, je peux parler un petit peu en français oder ich kann auf Französisch etwas sprechen. And then you have an option in at least in Germany to add either a third language, and that can be Latin or Spanish, or not. That's optional. But 2 languages, languages other than German, you have to have. And in other European countries, you add also at least one other language. That hometown where I'm from, if we drove an hour and a half, I'd be in France. So imagine an hour and a half from Eugene, where the University of Oregon is located. Where would I be? Somewhere in Woodburn, and all of a sudden I would speak another language. If I wanted to go shopping at the Woodburn factory outlets, maybe I need French. So everything is a little closer together in terms of nations, countries, and another 2 hours I'd be in the Netherlands from where I grew up. So I'd be speaking Dutch. 4 hours I'd be in Switzerland, and so on. So there is a focus on languages in the high schools also. And as I said, on the one hand, language learning can help you in the business world, but also if you were in a growing up on a continent that has such an entity as the European Union, you don't want to have things translated into your own language all the time, which limits your perspective. You want to learn the language of your neighbors so you can understand how they see the world. So there is more of an emphasis on languages in the European Union.
That's fascinating. To put it in that perspective, geographical perspective is pretty eye-opening. I appreciate that. That leads me into another question we have that could flow nicely about wondering what kind of careers you can get if you were to major in a language, and how would you answer that for this?
So I often get asked that question because it is not as clear. You study medicine, you become a doctor. You're studying engineering, you might work for NASA or something like that. When you're studying languages, you don't necessarily become a language teacher. You could, that is one career, either at high school or at the university or at different language schools. But you could also, as one of my former students has done, you could end up in a career that is related to tourism. One of my students is now one of the managers for a resort in Colorado. Another student is in Alaska. There are a lot of Germans in Alaska, traveling to Alaska, visiting Alaska. So careers in tourism. You can have teaching careers, government careers. I am working with a company right now who is looking at test preparation for the diplomatic, for students who want to enter the diplomatic service. So yes, I'm at the University of Oregon, but I'm consulting with with this company as if you want to be a diplomat in Central Europe, Central or Eastern Europe, German is one of the languages that you want to speak. Well, even if you're not directly in Germany, if you're in Poland or Czechoslovakia, in the Czech Republic, in the Slovakia, in former Eastern Bloc countries, German is one of the languages that will be helpful. So you could do that. I have students who have gone into radio broadcasting and TV. They have a radio station, for example, that is called Deutschlandfunk. We have some internships. Students are going for internships with Deutschlandfunk. Many different possibilities that you have. And that to me, that is liberating because it doesn't limit me to one career. I can use my language skills and what I have learned about language learning, about the world, about literature and culture of different countries. I can literally apply that in different contexts. At the U of O, we have had what we called a language roundtable. This is a few years ago. And then, what was he? Jim Shepard, president of the Board of Trustees. He didn't speak German, but he was a former French major. And he was, at the moment of then, when we put this language roundtable on, leading a Franco-American bank. And he says he got his first internship working for that bank that he ended up working for full-time after his college career. Because during the internship interview, he actually could talk to Joan of Arc. He had knowledge of French history and culture. And he says, we had a great interview. We talked about everything but the bank and related to the bank. And he continued to say that he got the internship. And then when he now is hiring people, he will also look out for, the way he put it, if I'm boarding a plane in Portland, going to Paris, you have a better chance getting the internship or the job that I'm hiring for if you have things to say, if you're an interesting person, a developed person, rather than I want to take my parachute and jump out of the plane because I am so bored. He said, those are his words. He said, I can teach you anything you need to know about the bank, or about our business practices. But you need to learn how to think and how to argue and history and culture before you come to us. So
that's great. Great answer. And a lot of careers. It sounds like you're opening up your options
yeah, a lot of
by
careers.
studying languages. So we had a couple other questions regarding what does being fluent mean? And then in addition to that, if you were to take on more than, if you were already bilingual, would it even be easier then to pick up a third language?
Mm-hmm. So don't think about being fluent as like climbing South Sister, and once you're up at the top, you can see everything around you and you've made it. That's not how it works in language. Language learning is a lifelong process. So there's a saying, an idiom in German, wer rastet, der rostet. He or she who rests, rusts. So you might have achieved a high proficiency level in a language, don't speak it in 10 years. That means you'll forget a few things, but that doesn't mean that you've forgotten everything or that you're not fluent anymore. You just need to refresh and maybe go to France or go to Germany, spend a couple of weeks there, things will come back. But also you can have a higher proficiency in listening. You can be a great listener because maybe you've heard in Oregon, we're probably speaking Spanish or Russian or German in your household at home. There's a large number of larger number of Russian speakers in Oregon historically. We have a large number of Spanish speakers in Oregon. So speakers who grow up with a certain language at home are called heritage speakers. A language other than English, for example, they're called heritage speakers. But those heritage speakers don't necessarily learn how to read and write the language. They don't have any formal instruction in grammar or other important parts related to the language. They just speak it at the dinner table. They speak it with their parents. And often those speakers, they can converse very well, but they don't write very well. So you can have different proficiency levels in different skills. And these proficiency levels will change as you work on certain skills, but not so much on others, and then the other way around. So it's a lifelong process. And then I learned basic English rather quickly. I have, ich habe, you have, du hast. It's very similar in English and in German. Haus is Haus, Maus is Maus, friend is Freund. So you have a lot of cognates, words that are similar in both languages. But then, so at the beginning, you have a curve that goes shoo, very, very up very quickly, learning a language, and then it kind of levels off. And the more advanced you get, the flatter this curve becomes, because you already know so much that adding something new isn't really happening that quickly anymore. So if you're going from zero to an intermediate level, that happens relatively quickly. You can do that in the 2 years at college or in 4 years in high school. If you go from intermediate to advanced, that will go a little slower. And then from advanced to superior, that will go even slower. So for me, if you figure back, I'm 48. If you figure back to when I started learning English, 9 to 48, so 39 years I've been speaking English, and I still don't know everything. It's an ongoing process. It's continuing.
It is it is an ongoing process, yes. Well, thank you for those responses. Another question was just how many, if you were to study German at the University of Oregon, how many years of German offerings are there?
Oh, we have 4 years of language classes. We have a German major and a German area studies major. A German literature major. So you can focus on literature and culture, or you can focus on area studies. If people want to, and then an area studies major means you can bring in uh, topic areas and classes outside of literature. You could have a journalism background. Um, you could you could double major in German and in business. There's a global business certificate with a German track, for example. And then pure language classes. So if you're studying for a Bachelor of Arts at the U of O, you have to have 2 years of language. And if you're majoring or minoring, let's begin with minor. If you're minoring in German, you need to go up to the 3rd year of German language. And obviously, if you're a major, you want to go as long for the full 4 years. So
fantastic. And then another question that kind of flows from that is, what are your thoughts and recommendations on studying abroad while you're studying a language?
So it is very important to study abroad, to go to the country. Studying a language of the country anywhere outside of this country is a focused study. It's a structured study. It's a systematic and very methodical learning. But when you're in the country, you encounter spontaneous situations. You're surrounded by the language all the time. So if you're going out to the supermarket and you can't find what you need to ask somebody. If you want to rent a bike to explore campus of Tübingen University, you need to figure out you need to reactivate. How do I ask questions? What's the vocabulary? You'll need to negotiate meaning in the moment. You'll learn how to negotiate meaning in our classes, regardless of whether it's German, Spanish, French, Arabic. But when you are not in the moment, when you have to do that, that's often difficult. You have to have a vivid fantasy to imagine, oh, my bike broke down. I have a flat to repair, versus, dang it, my bike broke down. I am in the middle of the countryside in Germany and I don't know what to do. So you're really forced to speak the language at that point, especially if the next passenger or walker coming by is an 80-year-old little old lady or little old guy who doesn't speak any English. So you have to use the language. So going abroad, experiencing the people, adding this experiential dimension. For example, when you go to Berlin, U of O has the oldest exchange program on the West Coast with Germany. And in Berlin, at the German parliament, after the Nazi period and the Holocaust and the Second World War, much of Berlin was destroyed during the war, and the German parliament was destroyed during the war. And it only after reunification in the late 80s, early 90s, was the wall that divided the city of Berlin removed, and the old parliament building that was there since the 19th century became once again the seat of parliament in Germany. But they didn't just rebuild that old thing, but they actually remodeled and rebuilt, and they added a glass dome on top of that building. And that glass dome looks down right onto the Chamber of Parliament. It is the, not the Senate in an American context, it is the House. So you look from that glass dome, you look right into the House. And why did the Germans do that? Well, they did that because they wanted to signal that nothing that went on before the Second World War and during the Nazi times should ever happen again. They wanted transparency in government, wanted to make sure that the government is responsible to the people and that the people are watching. So they put this glass dome on, and I can explain that to you. I'm getting goosebumps as I'm explaining that to you. But if you're actually standing in the glass dome, looking down onto this parliamentarian down there, you add a dimension, an experiential dimension that is difficult to get just from looking at a book. And so, of course, go abroad, study abroad, France, Italy, Australia, Britain, Chile, Argentina, wherever we have exchange programs. And we have exchange programs with close to 200 countries.
Wow, that's amazing. Our time is up for today, but Matthias, this was fantastic. I learned a lot, so I'm hoping all of you watching gleaned a lot of information and how valuable getting the perspective from other country languages really can add to your well-roundedness and opportunities in the future. So Matthias, thank you so very much for being with us today. And all of you viewers, if you have any questions or would like some more information from Matthias in the future, please go on the SAIL website and connect with our sales staff at UOregon email. We would love to hear more from you. Matthias, have a wonderful afternoon. Everyone else, we will. How do we say goodbye in German?
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you very much for having me. Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen. Thank you.